Buonasera a tutti, good evening everyone, and welcome to the 11th edition of the ICFF Presente Bella Vazza. My name is Mara Cataldi and I'm the Director of Operations of the ICFF, and here with me tonight, the co-founder, Artistic Director, Cristiano De Florentis.
Grazie Mara, thank you
Cristiano.
everyone, hello and thanks for being here for this first event of a section dedicated to architecture and design, architecture and design. Tonight we are going to be diving into the legacy of Olivetti architecture through a fantastic panel discussion moderated by the renowned architect Silvio Baldassarra and a fantastic slate of panelists.
But before diving into that, we would like to thank our presenting sponsor, Lavazza, for supporting us tonight and of course for the entire festival. We also would like to thank our leading sponsors, Delta Airlines, Masi, Campari, Castle Point Numa, Hampton Stone, Greg Golf, Empire Community, Rio Mare and Barilla.
Few people to mention, just a flight from Italy to Toronto to be here tonight is the in some way the coordinator, the president, the director of this committee of architecture and design. An applause to the architect Stefano Puggiatti, chair of the committee. Yes. And after, Silvio Baldassarra from NOR, Madeleine Zito from Greg Golf, Dragana Maznik, Anna Simone from Cecconi Simone, Luigi Ferrara, Dean of Center of for Arts, Design and Informatics at George Brown, Pietro Pelliccione from Italy Interiors, and Joanna Pergantis from Mapei. This is the committee, and a round of applause for them. They work so much for this event. An event that is going to end the 16th of July with an incredible exhibition and a movie on Renzo Piano at Harbourfront. Probably you received an email about this, and it's an incredible event that we are working together with the Institute of Culture and Harbourfront.
We also want to remind you all that tonight we have here with us Toronto typewriters that has a very impressive collection of Olivetti typewriters. So you had the chance to see some of those models at the box office. So they will be with us for the length of the festival until July 12. So you can, anytime you want, you can come back to the box office and take a look at those beautiful Olivetti typewriters.
So it's time to start, and I would like to call on stage the chair of NOR and the famed architect working with Renzo Piano on the new Toronto courthouse, a dear friend, Silvio Baldassarra. Thank you so much. Enjoy the panel, enjoy the documentary. Good night.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you, Cristiano, for those very kind words tonight. So tonight's film, Prospetiva Olivetti, a film about the iconic Italian Olivetti Company. After its visionary, as you've heard, Adriano Olivetti passed away in 1960, and the company was revived between the 60s and the 80s. But before we move to the film that you're about to see tonight, I've invited a distinguished panel to set the stage in the Olivetti family and the complementary local Toronto family that we'll discuss. In 1933, 32-year-old Adriano Olivetti took over as general manager of the typewriter company his father, Camillo, founded in 1908. Started in the Italian town of Ivrea, a municipality of Torino. This is like the place that we're in tonight, the distillery, was a city factory. By 1960, when Adriano passed away, Olivetti had massive company with factories in 5 countries and distribution in over 100 countries. Ivrea had been transformed into a major Italian manufacturing center, doubling in population to 30,000, attracting the best engineers and designers and factory workers. Also in 1960, Adriano's Citta Dell'Uomo, City of Man, is published, in which he talks about his philosophy of city planning. He argues, and I quote, "The street, the factory, the house are the most sustainable elements of civilization. Adriano's philosophy that he builds his company on is, and I quote again, the factory cannot just look at the index proper. We must distribute wealth, culture, services, democracy. I think the factory of man, not the man of the factory. Adriano hired the most talented architects of the time to design his factories, which are entirely of glass walls, because the workers inside had to see the mountains outside and the people outside had to see what was going on inside. The factories had cafeterias, playgrounds, room for debates, film screenings, libraries, nurseries, and a new hospital for the town of Ivrea. To combine and harmonize man and machine, Adriano hired the most talented architects and designers of the time to plan the workers' housing in neighborhoods and in small blocks of flats, 3 to 4 stories with green space. Before IBM, Apple, Google, and all of the others, Olivetti understood that good product design is good business. He hires the best product designers. Architect designers Marcello Nizzoli created the first portable typewriter, the Lettera 22, in 1949, outclassing the machine with performance and flexibility in the industry. In 1960, another product design leader in the invention of the first transistor-based mainframe computer, the Elia 9003. Our first panelist that I'm going to turn to is Stefano Pugliatti, who is to my left. Stefano is the founder of Elastico Farm, Franciri, Torino, Italy, an innovative and award-winning architectural firm, and a member, as Cristiano has said, of the ICFF committee, and actually just arrived from Venice a couple of days ago. I'd like to ask Stefano, who has lived in Venice and Torino for most of his life, how Olivetti affected his architectural studies and his career.
Thank you, Silvio, and thank everybody for being here to listen and to see this fantastic movie that we are going to see. And to me, it's a great pleasure to talk about Olivetti, because I tried to write down what I wanted to say, but actually I found it useless, because talking about Olivetti for an Italian architect trained in when I studied is very natural. We were trained, we grew up knowing who Olivetti was and what Olivetti has done. Because in our schools, they were teaching architecture, talking about the social value of architecture. So architecture is not building houses. Architecture is building places for people to live. And Olivetti was one of the few entrepreneurs who really took that in a literal way, in a very straightforward way. And this is, we have to be grateful to him, because all architects in Italy have been trained till the 90s, I think, end of the 90s, knowing that and having that as an example to follow. So when we were studying architecture, somehow we were studying at the same time sociology and and politics. So Olivetti was a politician too, and that part of politics and architecture in Italian school has been, in the past, has been very connected. Architecture universities were political places where politics was done. And Olivetti was an example we were taught to follow. And we were taught to follow that, even because he called great architects who would have the charisma to make us look at that, look at what meant doing architecture. So he hired architects all over the world to make buildings all over the world. So he was local and global at the same time. He was focused on the idea of a better living, creating better places for people and spaces for people, but at the same time, he was interested in changing the brains of the people who was living there. His Adriano Olivetti idea that his first clients would have been the workers who were actually working in his factory, would have been the first buyers of his typing machine. It's I think, a genial idea. We have to think that we are talking about the 40s, about a time where there were rich people and poor people, especially in a country like Italy, soon after the war, and telling we have to create a new generation of people that is so cultivated that will need a typing machine. And the first one will be our workers. That's a revolutionary idea. And I can tell you that it's revolutionary because I'm living for 20 years. Am I too long?
No, you're good.
So for 20 more years, I'm living in Torino, it's the city of Fiat. Fiat is a totally different philosophy. Fiat just built boxes for the workers to go to. It was very profitable, more successful than Olivetti, but it didn't create other than Juventus. This is the only thing that it gave to the city. And we see that now that Torino is starting to live again just because Fiat lost all the power it had, because it was keeping the city under a control of the factory. The people were, with a lot of people coming from all over Italy, controlled. And that's the big difference between Olivetti and Agnelli family, right? or the Fiat family. Was a great family too, but with completely two different perspectives. One was the profit and the creation of a new generation of people in Ivrea, and Torino, Fiat was the creation of wealth for one or few families.
Stefano, how was growing up and certainly in your architectural education, going through and seeing Ivrea and understanding Olivetti, how has that affected your career and what you're doing in architecture today?
It's affecting because I'm looking for the client that is Olivetti. That's reality. We are not interested in building buildings. We are interested in building places for people to live and to create the brain that is gonna see our things in a different way. So that's why our company, for example, looks all around the world to the places and to the people who can be that kind of client, not just a client.
Thank you. Certainly, when you see the film, you'll see more of this, but it was a utopian, dream that Olivetti did, and it certainly succeeded at it. And in the 19th and 20th century, small towns across Europe and North America were transformed by industrialization. And I'd like to draw a similar example to the city of Zlín in Czechoslovakia, which was transformed by the Bata Shoe Company in 1939, which established the Canadian Bata Shoe Company in Batawa near Trenton in Ontario, which was very close to us. And tonight, our remaining panel will discuss the similarities between Bata family and the Olivetti family. Founded by Thomas Bata in 1894 in Zlín, the city is transformed by a factory and workers housing, which is planned through the Garden City movement. The company expands to 89 countries to become the world's largest retailer, manufacturer, and then distribution of footwear and accessories. John, Thomas J Bata, the son, and his wife Sonia Bata established the Canadian Bata Shoe Company in 1939, growing the town to 3,400 workers in 1950. And I'd like to move on to Stefan Novakovic, the marketing leader of Dialogue, a writer and editor, formerly with Azure Magazine, Canadian Architect, Urban Toronto, Building Magazine. And I'd like our next speaker, Stefan, to talk about his article, which he wrote, Bataville, a shoe company's quest for global utopia, in Azure Magazine in April of 2021, where Stefan documents 3 acts of the Bata family. Stefan.
Thank you so much, Silvio. And before I get into talking about some Czechoslovakian family that I know not everybody has heard of, I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of context about becoming interested in these types of companies and in these types of issues. And to me, just listening to the type of world that Stefano has just described about the Olivetti Company and the Olivetti family, of not just building a company, not just building factories, but really building communities and building places for people to live. And Silvio, as you said, these sort of factories with these grand open windows where from the factory you can see out to the mountains, and from the town you can see into the factory. To me, it's just such a remarkable image, and it's in sort of stark contrast to what has been one of my obsessions for the past few years, which is how some of our biggest companies operate now, and especially one that I've been fascinated by most is Amazon. And I'm sure that, you know, just living in this day and age, we're all familiar with sort of how the biggest company in the world operates as sort of warehouses and fulfillment centers that we sort of hear about on the edges of Toronto. And we don't hear about these types of spaces as being architectural marvels, and we also don't hear about these types of spaces as being sort of complete communities or being particularly pleasant places to work, but they reflect to me the sort of state of the world, having friends that work there as it exists now. What labor is like. If you take a drive around Toronto, you'll see not just Amazon, but all sorts of big companies flanking the edge of the city in these big anonymous boxes and warehouses. But one day, about 1.5 years ago, as a journalist, I got an email in my inbox about a very different type of place. It was called Batawa. I'd never heard of it, but it's a community that's right around Peterborough on the Trent River. And in the email that I got, it described a really remarkable looking building, which was a renovation of an old factory building built in the 30s and 40s by the Bata Shoe Company. Now, I'll sort of give you a sneak preview that Les and Heather over there designed the building, so I'll let them talk more about that. But when I got this email and learned about this building, I saw immediately a really different type of place, one that, you know, a type of environment that sort of reflects that spirit of humanity and community that Silvio and Stefano have described. And so I started to research the Bata Shoe Company, which some of us may know from, you know, the Bata Shoe Museum that we have on Bloor Street. But beyond being the patrons of a shoe museum, it's actually has long been one of the biggest shoe companies in the world, and created throughout the earlier years of the 20th century a sort of model of building factory towns all around the world. So from Czechoslovakia to England to the Netherlands to Canada and the United States, the Bata Shoe Company expanded and built factories everywhere. But not only did they build factories, they built them in such a way where alongside their factories, they also built schools, housing for their employees, restaurants, cafeterias, recreation centers, hospitals even, healthcare facilities, and they did it all to a really incredible architectural standard of really building pleasant places to live. I think reflecting a similar type of ethos that Stefano was describing of thinking of your own employees sort of as your customers and showing them that degree of respect. And as a millennial sort of living in 2022, it was really remarkable to me that a company could do that, not just build a factory and give people some jobs, but also to build these complete communities and really show that care and devotion to building communities and taking care of people's well-being, and to express that through really, really top-notch architecture. So to me, the parallel, we're talking about our local connection here with the Bata Shoe Company and the Olivetti Company, really, I think, epitomizes a type of spirit that existed with really sort of pioneering, forward-thinking companies throughout the 20th century to be able to do all of this. And so I think to sort of set the stage for the film in a little way, it's remarkable to look back at all that from the lens of the world as it exists today, and when all of that can start to feel like a bygone era.
Maybe I'll bring in our other two panelists on my right side, and on my far right I have Les Klein. He's the principal and co-founder of BDP Quadrangle, best known for his innovative work in urban residential developments, adaptive research, reuse of existing structures, broadcast facilities, and dynamic environments. And Heather Doubledam, principal of Heather Doubledam Architecture and Design, leading advocate of sustainable design and betterment of a built environment. Heather's work includes diverse portfolio of workspace, hospitality, residential, and adaptive reuse. And as Stefan has said, both of you have had experience with predominantly Sonia Bata. Heather, you've done 3 projects with Sonia Bata, and I think Les one, but one in particular, the Bata Shoe Factory, is one that you both have in common, and Stefan has touched on that, and I don't know which one wants to go first, but maybe you want to speak a little bit. I mean, if we had Adriano here, Olivetti here, it would be great to actually be speaking to, the visionary behind one of these great utopian families, but probably the closest that we have tonight is probably Sonia Bata, which both of you have experienced. So I'm not sure who wants to go first.
Thanks, Silvio. I was going to say that it wasn't just the factory towns that the Bata family and also the Olivetti family really took pride in developing to a very high standard. It was also all of the stores and every single element of everything they touched was to such a high standard. We both got to know Mrs. Bata very well. We called her Mrs. Everyone called her Mrs. It would have been very strange to call her Sonia, I think. And she studied architecture when she was young. She grew up in Switzerland. And so I didn't get to know her late husband, Thomas Bata, just Mrs. Bata. But she had such a high standard of design, and it wasn't just about design of things and buildings. It was thinking about design as a way to improve the quality of everything. The factory is part of Batawa. It's a small town which was developed in a very similar way, as you mentioned, in 1939. But she, I think, later on, after the factory was closed in 2000, really wanted to see the town transform and figured a way to reuse the factory. She saw the town of Ottawa as being a model for the 21st century of kind of a satellite community where people could live and work surrounded by nature but connected by broadband. And this is, 20 years ago that she started dreaming about this and talking about it, and then the factory was sort of the pivotal point of all of this, like the centerpiece of the town. So Les, you started working with Mrs. Bata first.
Yeah, I began working with Mrs. Bata in 2012 and very quickly realized that she had epitomized the concept that great projects are made by great clients. She was very clear and very articulate in the things that she was looking for, and it was beyond the function, it was beyond the economics, it was really about a vision. Her idea of creating a sustainable community well before COVID, based on being able to work at a distance and enjoy both the country and the aspects of working in an international and interconnected community. In my mind, she really epitomized the kind of Steve Jobs idea of controlling every aspect of the product to the point where excellence was the thing that you thought of first. The beauty was important, the function was important, and ultimately it was maintaining the clarity of vision that brought you to the place where you started.
And I think there's so many tie-ins, having seen the film, between the two families and all the things that they valued, and the understanding that design was something that could have so much impact in terms of social impact and economic impact. So it wasn't just about creating these wonderful spaces, it was about people, the people that worked for them. And so their philosophy was that happy, healthy, and well-paid staff would develop a fantastic product. So they cared so much about all the different environments that they developed. And actually, there's one thing that really struck me in terms of some similarities. I was reading an article that Sonia Bata had been quoted in the 70s. She was on the National Design Council. There was a National Design Council, a federal council in Canada in, I guess, late 60s through to kind of late 70s. And she said that the federal government is the largest purchaser of products and services in the country, in every country. And if they don't value good design, who will, So that was something that was that really struck me about the importance of design excellence in everyone's lives.
And it didn't start with Heather and me as much as we'd like to think. She hired John Parkin to design a landmark, beautiful headquarters for them in the Don Mills area. She hired Ray Moriyama to design the Bata Shoe Museum. These are visions that she brought to the table from beginning to end. And she was intimately involved. We have wonderful pictures of her sitting with the designers, designing the Bata shoe stores, designing the packaging. There was this notion that by doing good, you can do well.
I never had the chance to meet her even in doing the research, but one thing that strikes me is how holistic the vision of design is. There's this Tom Waits quote that the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Yep.
So the end result isn't a pair of shoes or a nice building, and to hell with everything else. But in order to get to that design quality, whether in architecture or in product design, you have to have this really holistic viewpoint where you think about the well-being of the person making it. You think about the well-being of the person on the factory floor, and you think about their kids, and you think about the community around them.
Yep.
And I think in a way that connects us to the Olivetti family, and Stefano, what you were saying is that Olivetti, not just as a company, but also as a part of politics, as a part of society. I think, I don't know if you feel it's the same type of spirit that in order to have good product design, you have to be good at everything else.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the Olivetti, the community, the people coming from Ivrea is different from the people coming from other places in Italy. And Ivrea is just a very small city, is a very small town, close to the mountains, close to Val d'Aosta, in the way to go from Italy to France. It's not an important place. It has never been an important place. Historically, it was something, but nothing really special. It became special because of Olivetti, and the people is very different. These people is they do a lot of sport. People from Ivrea are a lot of champions in many outdoor sports, because Olivetti just nourished that kind of pushed people to do sport, to do things. So it's creating the facilities when there were not many facilities in Italy. So it's at the same time they were doing that and building one of the, I think, more interesting interior design examples of store, that was the Olivetti store in Piazza San Marco in Venice with Carlo Scarpa, which is a jewel that is untouchable, and that you are just happy to be able to still see and still experience. It's not anymore an Olivetti store, of course. And you have to know that Olivetti actually, he was the one that invented the computer. It was like somehow stolen by some industrial spy.
This is some Italian propaganda.
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm paid for. I'm an Italian spy in Canada. And but that's true about that. There's many films that tell about this thing. So there was an open mind entrepreneur can do a lot of good things, because he knows how to make money and how to use money.
I think, his, the book that he wrote when he passed away in 1960 was a book that was not simply about how to make beautiful and great typewriters. It was a book on city planning. I mean, this is someone who, his background is engineering, his background is business. It's about producing some of the most beautiful typewriters in the world, and computers as well. But his treatise that he leaves, to the world when he passes away is about city planning, and that tells you a lot about what was really important to him. And I think to a certain extent the Bata family does the same thing, where they create these towns, and the towns are, as we talked earlier, they're different in every place, but they're interested in building towns for the workers, because the workers are important in the business.
I think that's such a fascinating thing, that you connect product design, the typewriter, and they made some damn good typewriters, with urban planning, something that exists on the very small particular scale, with a macro scale, with a community scale, and that they're connected, that you have to, that the same type of thinking that leads you to excellence in one is excellence in the other. And I wonder, it's so interesting to me to hear you describe, Stefano, people from Ivrea having success in sports, in the outdoors, in being different. I'm curious, because Heather and Les, you've spent more time in Batawa than I have, what the community there is like to this day, and what kind of legacy that left behind for the folks that live there.
Well, they actually built a ski hill. Well, they didn't build the hill. The hill was there, but they built a ski lift, this tiny little hill. And the whole area, the whole region is all these sports facilities, sort of like the hub for the entire region all the way around. There's walking trails and what is that, biking, off-road biking, tons of hockey in the winter and soccer fields that they started building. So it's a very similar thing actually in terms of it being a place that focused on the whole person and sports being a part of that, sports and nature activities.
It really was not a haphazard approach. There was a guiding vision, and it had to be done proactively. It could not be done reactively. Oh, gee, people like this? Well, let's do it. No, let's do this so that this can become a center for the vision that we have. She was very deliberate about it, and she poured a lot of her own resources into it with the notion that this was going to be not only work in itself, but an exemplar for how to create really the company town for the 21st century. And I think that sadly she passed away before she was able to realize that vision, in the same way as the Olivetti founder passed away before he really was able to make it happen, and left it to the next generation and the next generation of managers to take that vision and implement it. A huge challenge, but if that vision is clear from the start, it can survive the founder.
You know what? I think we're going to end there because I couldn't have wrapped this session up any better than you have, Les, because we're now going to go to the film, which is about what happened after Adriano Olivetti passes away at age 60 and how the firm carries on and reinvents itself after the founder leaves. And you know, this is all really important. I think hopefully you've learned something about Adriano, which is not part of the movie, which was our intent tonight to expose a little bit of that. And you've learned a little bit about a family that is here in Toronto still. We have a number of their buildings still. Unfortunately, we've lost the John B. Parkin building on Eglinton, but that's life. But hopefully you'll enjoy the movie, and I want to thank Stefano Pugliatti.
Thank you.
Stefan.
Thank you.
Heather, and Les for joining me on the panel. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. And this concludes tonight's panel discussion. We're going to watch the film now. And before the film, we have a special message from the director, Davide Maffei. I hope you had a great night. And we hope to see you again next time here at the Trinity Cinema. Thank you so much, guys.
Buonasera, sono Davide Maffei, il regista dei due documentari Paradigma Olivetti e Prospetiva Olivetti. Questa sera vedrete Prospetiva Olivetti, che è, diciamo, in qualche modo il secondo film di questo dittico. Perché un dittico? Perché il progetto, che è nato nel 2018 e si è protrato insomma per circa 2 anni e mezzo, è stato, insomma, ci ha portato a conoscere un po' quello che è stato il mondo dell'Olivetti, che è stato veramente vasto, molto ampio e sparso veramente in tante parti del mondo. E a un certo punto il materiale che era stato accumulato era tale che in qualche modo ci ha spinti a non volerlo in qualche modo disperdere oppure ridurre, ma a separare quello che sono, diciamo, due aspetti in qualche modo dialoganti fra di loro, che sono quelli del design industriale, del quale protagonista è stato l'altro film Paradigma Olivetti, e invece l'architettura, che abbiamo portato all'interno di Prospetiva Olivetti, con un focus particolare che è quello relativo alle architetture che Olivetti ha costruito all'estero. Eravamo molto incuriositi dal fatto che questa azienda, molto importante, appunto molto conosciuta soprattutto per quello che è stato il design dei suoi prodotti, insomma macchine da scrivere, calcolatrici e computer, in qualche modo aveva portato anche questa innovazione, questo approccio all'avanguardia e alla grande libertà data ai singoli progettisti di poter sviluppare progetti interessanti, aperti e con pochi vincoli, insomma, da parte dell'azienda, non solo sul territorio italiano dove è molto conosciuta, ma anche all'estero. In qualche modo andando a coinvolgere e a chiamare tutta una serie di architetti, da Louis Kahn a Kenzo Tange a James Stirling, che sono stati dei maestri dell'architettura del Novecento. Quindi in ogni paese in qualche modo veniva scelto un architetto tra i più competenti, insomma, dell'epoca, in qualche modo, per dare un segno, un simbolo della presenza dell'Olivetti nel mondo. E quindi ci ha molto interessato capire che cosa è successo a queste architetture, che cosa erano diventate nel frattempo, se erano state demolite, se erano conservate, se avevano subito delle manipolazioni. Questo è stato un po' il focus del nostro lavoro, per cercare di ricostruire e mettere insieme i pezzi di questa storia, che è stata straordinaria non solo per la storia industriale del design italiano, ma anche probabilmente dell'architettura mondiale in un qualche modo. Voglio ovviamente ringraziare l'Associazione Archivio Storico Olivetti di Ivrea, che ci ha supportato in questo lavoro, e ovviamente l'Italian Contemporary Film Festival, che ha deciso di proiettare i nostri film. Vi auguro una buona visione.
In tutto il mondo ha costruito fabbriche e palazzi e quindi ha acquisito un nome mondiale. Era difficile trovare un committente come l'Olivetti, era impossibile.
Thank you.